Hello, welcome to this video on paper 2, question 2. Now remember, paper 2 is a non-fiction paper that's worth 50% of your overall GCSE and it lasts an hour and 45 minutes. Okay, quick little recap of the exam paper itself. So paper 2 would be non-fiction. There'll be two pieces of non-fiction. Both texts will be linked on a theme or a thread between the two of them, and they will have a different perspective on that thread. And in particular, this one we're looking at and we've looked at in the other videos relates to the relationship between a parent and a child growing up. So that's the theme. We see it from two different perspectives. Now, usually you'll see it from a modern perspective. One text will be a modern text and the other one will be not so modern. Okay, and that could be from a period of time. So it can be anywhere within the last 100 or so years. So a reminder of the structure of the paper, you've got a writing task, and then you've got 4 reading questions. Question 1, question 2, question 3, and question 4. And of course today we're going to look at question 2. Now, question 2 doesn't change. It follows a very, very similar format as the one we've got here. So it goes something along the line, you need to refer to source A and B, and it will always ask you to look at both sources. And this one gives you a statement. The ways boys spend their time playing as young children is different. Use details from both sources to write a summary of the different activities the boy in source A enjoys and the boy in source B enjoyed when he was young. Okay, so that's what you'll get. You'll be told to read source A and B, and you'll be given a thread. So here is the thread about the boys, and then you'll have to write a summary. Now the question itself, what is it doing? Well, it's checking to see that you've understood the text. So it really isn't a question where you can do skim reading of the text. You really need to know what's going on for you to be able to write a response to this text. It gets you to focus on the topic and not the writer. So this isn't about the writer. And that's quite a difficult thing for students to get their head around, because often they feel the need to talk about a writer because we spend most of the time in English talking about the writer and what did the writer think and why has the writer done something. This is one of those questions where you do not talk about the writer. In fact, do not use the word writer in your writing. There is no need to. This one is about finding inferences. Okay, so you've got to find something that's hidden in the text, something that's between the lines. And really, the task is asking you to explain an inference. Now, just to get one thing out of the way, this question is deceptive because it uses the word summary. And actually, it doesn't mean a summary in the way that we're used to a summary. A summary, for most of us, it means you rewrite it but put it in your own words. And that isn't what will get you marks for this question. So for example, here we've got some sentences that are on that line. In source A, the writer is writing about his son's birthday and he is thinking about how quickly the boy has grown up. He cannot believe that the time has flown by. In source B, the writer talks about how grown up his son is. He is now older and looks very different. Okay, you wouldn't get any marks for those sentences. And the reason it's there is to show you that it isn't that kind of writing. It's a different kind of writing. So when you see the word summary, be clear that it isn't you rewording everything and putting your own words. Okay, it is doing something different. So we're going to take you through that now. Okay, so when we look at the question, one of the things I like to think about is the idea of the examiners asking you to look at a thread and asking you to pick out something in the text that's in there. And a bit like sewing, sometimes you see it, sometimes you don't see it. And that's what the examiner is asking you to do, is to pick up a thread and pull it and kind of explain it in more detail. And that's what the examiner is asking you to do. So as you can see here, I've got two pictures of the text. So in one text, you can see that there's more than one example of the thread. In another text, there's only one example. And with that idea is to remember that there might not be that much of a thread in the text. And there might be just one or two things that you can say. This isn't going to be one of those questions where it's hunt every example of the different activities. Okay, it really is about picking a thread. All right, so that's one thing you've got to be mindful of, is there'll probably not be lots of stuff to say about the different activities. There might just be one or two things in each of the text. And so don't see it as a tick off activity. So for example, you've got 8 marks there. It doesn't mean that there are 8 separate things to talk about. And an examiner is not there counting out how many points you've made about different texts. So get it clear into your head that you're probably only going to mention about 2 points, 2 or 3 points maximum about the text. So you're not looking to make 8 different things that you can spot about the different activities. A bit of advice for this question is, in your planning, make a little table and just go and look at the different sources and go, source A, right, have a look at the text, right, what's the kind of activities that the child's got? So you could say here you've got interactions with adults, physical contact, noisy, silly games. In source B, we've got a variety of activities, creative and imaginative, messy and chaotic, and noisy. Now, notice that those words are not in the text. And those are words that I've used to describe the thread. And that's really, really key, because a lot of students, what they tend to do is they find something in the text, then they say, right, this is it. And that's not really a good starting point. You need to have your own words, and your vocabulary is really, really important. So like, for example, it doesn't say noise in the text. That's actually my inference that I've picked up to say that it's noisy. And so that's me straight away using an inference. And examiners are looking for particular words, okay? And they're looking for particular inference words that shows to an examiner that you've read between the lines and you've understood the situation and you've understood what's really, really going on. Now, when you get your little table like that, okay, it gives you a starting point, and you can see, and you probably see straight away, that both source A and source B are noisy, and you can kind of, this idea of being creative, you've got silly games and being creative. You've got a number of different things in there. Now, advice would be, don't write about everything and select what you think would be useful. So, for example, here I've ticked the things that I'd probably write in my paragraph, and I'd probably write something about both being noisy, and I'd probably write about source B being quite creative. Okay, so that's what I'd use. And so that's your starting point. So does it matter that I'm not going to write about the variety of activities, or messy and chaotic, or the interaction with adults, or physical contact, or silly games? It doesn't, okay? You can mention them in your explanations, but don't feel that you have to write about everything, because the key with this question is the depth of your explanation, and it's how you explain more than your points that are going to get you the marks. So I'm going to take you through and just give you an idea of how we can approach this. So if we have a look at the first one. So what I've done is I've written the first sentence for you to kind of give you an idea of how you could do it and start it off. Now, this isn't going to be fantastic writing. This is showing off your reading skills. So it's your explanation that's key in this. So if you have a look at the first one, in source A, the child enjoys noisy activities which involves adults. He loves running up to people and waiting for them to twang his lips like a ruler on a table. Now straight away you can see that I've got an inference, which is the purple, and then I've got my thread, which is the activities. And actually what I've done in that first one is I've also included one of my other things in source A. So I've included 2 different bits in there. And I've put a quote in there as well. And it's really easy to do this, and it's something I'd recommend to students to do, is you have a point and then you just put a colon and then introduce your quote just like that. Okay, and it flows on, and you don't need to do that. And a quote to show this is this. All right, you can straightly link into that. That then gives you more time for your explanations, and you don't waste a sentence having to introduce your quote. You just glue it to the end of your point there. Okay, so that's one way of doing it. And look, straight away what I've done is I've just focused on one source, and you can do that. That's not a problem. You can talk about source A and you can talk about source B in separate paragraphs. That's fine. The other thing you could do is you could try and link them together. So both source A and B show that the children liked noisy activities. So there's my inference and there's my thread. And you can see it, I'm talking about it straight away and I'm putting an inference. And here I've done it a little bit differently with the use of quotes. I've kind of embedded the quotes into the sentence just to make it flow and a little bit easier. And remember, we're not looking for big quotes. So you can put words in or phrases in there and you can carry that on with your point there. So in source A, the boy likes adults to twang his lips. So I've kind of really reduced that quote there and just put it down to 3 words. And in source B, the child likes to play noisy instruments like drums and tin trumpets. So all I'm doing is I'm using my quote to support. Now your quote in this question is not a big thing. So whereas other things you've got to analyze your quote, you don't have to do it here. Your quote is just supporting, and that's its role in this question. So let's have a look at how to write a response then. Okay, so we're going to start off with our sentence there. So that's the one we've had before, show you can develop it. So the key thing is once you've got your thread of an idea, you develop it. Okay, so you start with a statement and you've got an inference there, noisy. Then you look at building that inference further. So I've got down here, this suggests that the child enjoys the repetition of the activity and expectation of what is going to happen. Because if the noise alone was the source of enjoyment, he'd do that one activity on his own. Now you can see that I've highlighted a few words because those words are the words that are actually doing the work for me here. So I've got the word suggests. Now I've put some other words down the side here that will help you. That helps you to develop your inference. So I've said it's noisy, but also I want to dig a little bit deeper. And the word suggests and hints and implies and the others there help you dig a little bit deeper. And that's what you've got to do because that's our thread, the activities that's our inference, noisy. But what we've got to do is dig deep and explain things further. Where students struggle with this question is they move too quickly onto the next idea and they've not explained it. So I've explained a bit further and I've not just said, oh, this suggests it's very, very noisy. I've added a bit more and I've said this idea, the repetition of the activity is what's really interesting for the child. It's just secondary that it's noisy. And actually, if it was just the noise alone, I don't think the child would carry on doing it. It's the fact that the adults are involved in making this noise. So I've taken that inference and I've explained it. Let's have a look at the next bit that can go with it. Maybe the child is at an early stage in his development and so he cannot communicate with adults properly. But this activity allows him to interact in some way without speaking or forming a conversation. The interaction is a form of non-verbal communication. So again, I've got some words that help me develop that explanation. So I'm giving some reasons. And what you're noticing is, well, what is it about the noisy activity that the child likes? Well, it's the repetition. Why does the child like it? Well, maybe the child is at an early stage and so he cannot communicate. So really what I'm doing with that one little inference is I'm saying because. Why does he like noisy activities? What's the reason for him liking the repetition? What's the reason? And so I'm developing and I'm extending my ideas. There's still more to go in this paragraph. As the child gets older and older, he develops the ability to speak, and then the appeal of his interaction will be lost of this interaction will be lost because the child will be able to communicate better and so will be able to use other means to interact with adults. I've kind of given a kind of consequence in there. And so you can see, okay, that I've extended this idea and I've explained it further. And that's the secret to this question. I've not got hundreds of ideas, but what I've done is I've taken this idea and I've gone, but why does the child like noisy activities? But why? But why? And it's that level of explanation that really, really gets you the higher marks. It's not the amount of points, it's that development. And what we want to do is just keep digging and go, but why? But why? But why? And in this bit here, I've kind of said, well, you know, he likes noisy activities. Why is it? It's because of the process and the interaction with adults. But why? Because he can't talk. So I've given a reason. Okay. What will happen maybe later on? I've given a consequence here. I've said, well, when he can talk, he probably won't be interested in doing this because he can use other means. He might be able to tell a joke or say something funny to the adults. So that's really about a paragraph. And you can see that these words, and try and get these words into your writing. Suggest, because, and so, maybe. And try and get them into your writing so you can extend and develop. And remember, it's that development that's the key here. Now, what about the other opportunity? Well, the other opportunity you can do is where you can link them both together. I'm going to show you how you can do that very, very simply. So I've got the sentence there. Both source A and B show children liked noisy activities. In source A, the boy likes adults to twang his lips. And in source B, the child likes to play noisy instruments like drums and tin trumpets. Now, this is a different approach because what you then do is you then talk about one source and then talk about the other. So here I've got source B highlights how Victorian parents were not comfortable with noise as it makes the writer nervous. Now look, I've got another quote there which is showing I'm using a different bit from the text just to prove my point. So I don't have to talk about the word. All I'm doing is just proving my point and developing that idea. This implies how it was preferred if a child was seen and not heard, because that would suggest that the parent was a good parent because they can control their child. Now notice, look again, the words because, suggests, because they could control their child. For them, a noisy child would be a sign of disobedience and a lack of manners. Therefore, a noisy child is a naughty child. And so I've taken that idea and I've developed. Haven't I given a reason why? Okay, why they're noisy? Okay, I've given that reason there. So source B. Source B suggests to us that modern parents view noise differently and that they see a child generating a noise as a way to communicate and interact with the world. Possibly between the two extracts we have seen a change in culture in how we raise children. When once a child making noise was a sign of bad manners, we now see children making noises as a developmental stage in the child growing up. We would see a quiet child as something unusual. So again, all this is one paragraph. But with it being one paragraph, I've got my starting point, my statement, then I've got my look at source B, and then look at source A. And again, I'm using that. What does it suggest? What does it imply? Okay, and I'm given my reasons. Because. Okay, so that gives you an idea of how you could do it both ways. You can either do it one by looking at one source, or you can look at the other source and look at them both together. Okay, let's be really clear. What's going to get you marks? Okay, so I'm going to go through quick things with you. Just make sure that you understand what will get you marks and what will not get you marks. Referring to techniques and language devices, you will not get a single mark if you refer to techniques and language devices. So you need to make sure that you do not refer to any techniques. And as I mentioned before, you don't even need to talk about the writer. There is no need with this question. Remember, you're picking a thread. That's what you need to remember. Use a quotation. That will get you marks. Making sure that you've got quotation. Remember, we showed you two ways of doing that, by having a colon and adding it to the end of your statement, or embedding it into a sentence. Writing about both texts. One of the things that examiners will look to see is that you've covered both texts, and you are penalised, meaning that you'll get less marks if you only write about one text. So you need to make sure you write about both source A and source B. Now, that's either a paragraph for source A or a paragraph for source B, or you could do that where you link them both together. It is not looking for the similarities and differences. That's a really, really important thing to think about. It's not looking, oh, this is this, this is that. If you find something the same, that's great, but it's not about looking for similarities and differences. So really avoid using those words if you can. It's about looking at that thread and making an inference about it. And it's not about going, well, this text is an old text and this text is a new text. Okay? And that links into the last one. Okay? There really isn't much to say about the text when you say that one is a modern and one is an old text. Okay? There are no marks for that. Okay? It's quite obvious because the examiner on the actual paper tells you one is written in a particular time and one is fairly modern. So you get no marks for that. So don't even mention it. Don't mention it. It could be, like the example I've given, it could be part of the reasoning why, and we use the idea of how children should be seen and not heard. So that could be in the explanation, but it isn't a point of comparison. There's no comparison you can make, really. Okay, so we're going to recap time and we're going to go through some quick statements now, and we're going to get you to think about which of these statements are true and which of these are false. So quickly, if you've got time, just pause the video and decide which of these are true and which of these are false. And shortly, I'm going to move on to the answers. Okay, let's go through the answers then. So number one, okay, the examiner wants you to rewrite the text but put it in your own words. That's false. The examiner doesn't want to do that. In fact, if you do that, you'll get very few marks. Okay, this is about inferences, picking a thread and explaining it. Number two, there are 8 marks. The examiner is looking for you to find 8 things. That's incorrect. Okay, there are not 8 things the examiner is looking for. There isn't even a list that the examiner is looking for. The examiner is marking you on your ability to explain an inference. That's what they want you to do. Number 3, the examiner does not want you to talk about techniques or how the text is written. That's true. All right, for this question, it's none of that. Number 4, you can get full marks for writing about just one text. That's false. Okay, you are limited in the amount of marks if you only write about one text, so you need to write about both. Number 5, the quality of your explanation is more important than your idea. That's fairly true. All right, it's how you explain your inference, and a lot of students get the most marks from their explanation rather than their idea. Number 6, your vocabulary is important on this question. That's true. Okay, you do need to be very, very careful with your words and show off with your words. Number 7, you don't need to use quotations for this question. That's false. You do need to use quotations for that because that's supporting your ideas. You're not analysing the quotations, but you're using them to support your point. Okay, if there's anything in there that you're not sure about, go back and watch the video and do look out for the other videos that we do have. Thank you.